Well, hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Rescued podcast. You might notice a few things are different. Number one is you can see me, which is the first time I've done video recording here in the podcast. And I thought, why not? Then for Christmas, for a bonus episode. And speaking of a bonus episode and Christmas, I want to give everybody gifts. And the gift I want to give you for this holiday season is to give you something else to listen to because, hey, I've wrapped up season one for Rescued for the year. And while you're heading out on your road trips, you're heading out for some fabulous bushwalking, hiking, climbing, mountaineering, pack rafting, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to have some fresh things in your ears as you do those long road trips. So I am stoked to introduce you to the amazing Ashley. And Ashley runs a podcast out of her home. I'll get her to tell me a little bit more of where she is and what that is all about, which I hugely recommend. And not only do I recommend it, I have to give a massive nod to the work that she's done and how she has inspired this podcast that I do, that she's inspired the work of Rescued podcast. And I had the absolute pleasure of meeting her when I was in the States a couple of months ago now. And I'm stoked to be able to introduce you guys to her. So, Ashley, hi, and welcome to Rescued podcast.
Oh my gosh, that was the most amazing introduction I've ever received in my life. I'm so flattered and honored. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you to invite me here to chat with you for a little bit. It's very nice.
Oh, bless you. So, tell everyone where you're coming to us from because, obviously hearing an accent, and a lot of the people who are listening to Rescued, big Australian audience, but you don't have an Aussie accent. Tell me, where are you from and where are you coming to us today?
I was born and raised in Alaska, and I'm sitting here in my little home, my little ranch style home in Anchorage, Alaska right now, and just got off work, and it's just been snowing like crazy this last month. So we're getting tons of snow, and it's nice and cold outside, and big blanket of whiteness everywhere. So it's really beautiful. So that's where I am right now.
Fantastic. So, why don't you tell me about, and I'm just going to do that cheesy product placement thing. Some people might have picked up that I was, let me see, I'll just take those headphones off. There we go. That looks a bit better. Um, you might have seen me on socials over the last couple of months wearing this hat around a bit. So tell me about the Sharp End podcast. Why, how, where, what's the story? How long has it been going?
So the Sharpen podcast is something that I came up with about 9 years ago. I was in Salt Lake City, and I was driving from, I was living in a van at the time, and I was driving from climbing crag to climbing crag to climbing crag between my, my outdoor educating work stints. And I was reading the book by American Alpine Club, the book called Accidents, pretty religiously, just to learn from other people's mistakes. And I'm thinking to myself, I was telling the person that was in my best friend who was in my van with me, I said, Josh, I think that this book should come to life. This book should be a podcast. Somebody should make this book into a podcast. And he's like, that's a good idea. And then, a day goes by, and I said, you know what, Josh? I'm going to make that book into a podcast. I'm going to make those stories come to life. And I dreamed this idea up, and that's how it sort of was started because, there's so much shame and guilt and embarrassment and judgment behind incidents and outdoor accidents, and so many people I found in my 15 years of doing outdoor education that nobody really wants to come forward and share their incident because it's a vulnerable space, and it takes courage and bravery to come forward and be like, hey, I made this mistake and this is what I learned from it. And I want to share this so you don't make the same mistake. And what a concept, And so I'm an empath, and I believe in learning from other people's mistakes to minimize future outdoor accidents. And so I really try to give people a nice, safe, judgment, shame-free space to share their stories with the outdoor community. And so that's how it was birthed. And I've been working on the show for about 8.5, 9 years, and I produce one and or two episodes a month, depending on what else I'm doing in my life because I do work a full-time job. This podcast does not provide enough financials for me to do it full time. So I do have a full-time job. So it's kind of, a passion project that I do in between my other work.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. Two episodes a month, and most people will realize that. Yeah, the Rescued podcast, maybe about one a month-ish.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of work goes into it. So, what about your outdoor background? You said that you were going from crag to crag when you had this idea. So, would you say is climbing your main child that you love? If you had to pick all your favorite outdoors children, would climbing be its favorite?
It climbing was definitely it definitely used to be my favorite. It used to define me. That's I was a climber and that's what I did in my all through my 20s, and then I blew my knee out, and then and also living in Alaska, it's tough to be a climber in Alaska because the rock here is so few and far between and the seasons aren't that long. So once you get you start climbing a bunch again in the summertime, then you get better and better and better. And maybe you're climbing from, beginning of the season to 5.7 or 5.8. And then at the end of the season, maybe you're climbing 5.10 or 5.11. But then it's winter. And so winters are long here. So then you're either climbing in the gym, which I've never really been super excited about doing. And but then if I don't climb all winter long, all fall and winter long and spring long, then I'm back at climbing 5.7. So it kind of got difficult for me to keep going backwards with my climbing skill set. And so it's tough to be a climber in Alaska, like I said. And now just sort of with my knee not being nearly as strong as it was previous to my injury, I have different hobbies these days. So, but I still love climbing, and I can't wait to get back on the rock at some point when I'm a little bit more strong.
Yeah, and that ice and snow has melted away.
That's right.
So what would you say? I mean, like we said, 9 or 10 years you've been doing this, which is an amazing resource and library of great learnings for so many people
Thank you.
in your collection there for the sharp end. What are some of the things now that you've learnt, I guess, about learn about people as adventurers, as outdoors people, as sort of overall that you can glean from all of that experience of listening to stories?
Hmm. There's been quite a few common themes throughout many of the incidents and causes of why they've happened. The biggest one would be, complacency. Um,
Mm.
and so I think for me, it's learning all the themes and threads that relate all the incidents together, and also just being really compassionate and empathetic to everybody that has experienced an incident or an accident in the outdoors, because so many people, including myself, forever have said, "Oh yeah, I'm invincible," or maybe I didn't say that out loud, but I was definitely thinking it. "Oh, I'm invincible. That can never happen to me. That would never happen to me," and it does. It happens to you. It will happen to you. Something will happen to you, and if you have a margin of safety where, or if you have increased um, experience outside, and you're going outside and playing a lot and you're recreating a lot, like you have an increased chance of being involved in an accident. It's just
Mm, mm.
going to happen. It's statistics. And so I think for me, the one of the biggest learnings has been, stepping back and pausing and giving space and accepting that, anything can happen to anybody at any time, and
Mm.
not judging and not shaming and not belittling and not making people feel lesser or that you are bigger or better or smarter
Yeah.
because you're not. And I think that's really important for all of us to just sort of take a look in the mirror and realize that.
It's a real humbling thing to actually realize, actually,
Yes.
we're all on a level playing field, and
Yes,
to
exactly.
recognize that. It doesn't matter how many years experience or how much training or what our skill level
No.
is, nature has a way of bringing us all into, I guess, yeah, into that same playing field.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so what about, the nature of the stories that you hear on the Sharp End? Is it all mountaineering and climbing, or what's the kind of the mix there?
It used to be pretty specific to climbing and alpinism and mountaineering. It did used to just sort of have the specific topics in the show. But then I was like, wait a minute, that's really pretty exclusive, Ashley. That's pretty exclusive. And so I decided to branch out and do other activities like hiking and backpacking and and kind of by branching out that way, I felt like it was allowing me to reach a wider audience, and I thought that was really important. There's one interview that I did with a woman who was hiking in Hawaii, and she got sort of taken out by a rogue wave, and
Wow.
that it was so interesting because that episode, I was like, I wonder if this is gonna be kind of a challenging one, if this one's gonna get a lot of listens, and it got so many listens because it was so different. And you don't think about getting nailed by a rogue wave when you're hiking casually in Hawaii, but that's the prime example of like, okay, this can happen to you at any point in time. So
Mm.
it's kind of cool.
So that was an interesting episode, so maybe, check out the hiking in Hawaii one. Have you got another sort of if people were looking for, say, I wanna say the gateway drug into the Sharp End podcast, is there episodes that sort of stand out to you as ones that you go, "You know what? If you wanted to know where to start, because after 9 years, you're gonna have a load in there." Where is any sort of standout that people could go looking for?
Oh my goodness. Well, if you're new to the podcast, the beginning couple of year episodes, like at the beginning, like I said, I was doing one episode a month for many, many, many years, and just this last year, I'm trying to do two a month. But the beginning episodes of maybe the first 24 or so, I was recording in a bus that I lived in on the side of the road in outside of Haines, Alaska, and my heating element was a wood stove, so you hear crackling, and I'm recording
Oh, nice.
in a bus, like pirating some Wi-Fi from this closest house, and so the audio recording is really not that great, and really that's been a theme through the whole 8.5, 9 years of doing this show, is that my audio quality has never been that great or consistent because the nature of my full-time job, which is traveling for work, as doing safety for TV shows and outdoor education, so I'm recording on the road most of the time. So my Wi-Fi is very sporadic, and I do apologize for that. And I do understand, and I know that that is the case, and I'm working on it for 2024. So just keep that in mind. But with that said, the beginning episodes may be a little bit more rougher to listen to, and the later episodes have definitely gotten better as I've gotten more mature with my style and my confidence as a podcaster. But if you want to know about where you start in terms of which episode, there's been
Have you got a
so
favorite
many
child?
good ones. There's been so many good ones. I do like all three live ones that I've done. The first being with Charlie Cicera, who is this super amazing local badass guy who lives in Anchorage, Alaska. He is a really incredible alpinist. And I did a live interview with him at Alaska Mountaineering and Hiking a couple years back, and he talked about his and Jack Tackle's epic. So tune into that one. The second live one I did was with Miss Quinn Brett, who is one of my most favorite female climbers in the history of the world. And she was climbing she was climbing in Yosemite on El Capitan, and she fell about 100 feet and hit her back on the flake,
Oh my
and severed. I think she severed her spine, and she's she can't walk. She's in a wheelchair. So that one was really really gripping. I definitely cried during that
mm.
interview. Um, and the third live interview that I've done is with Mr. Adam Campbell, who is an Arctic athlete, and he was backcountry skiing with his soulmate and another. I don't want to call her an idol, but I definitely idolize her. His soulmate and his partner in crime and wife. They were backcountry skiing in Canada, and it was the last run of the day, and she was caught in an avalanche and buried like 12 feet down from what I remember. And when they got to her, and they were digging and digging and digging and digging and digging like frantically to get Laura out of the snow, the first thing that Adam saw once they exposed a part of her body was her left hand, and on her left hand, he saw her wedding ring, and it was just like the most visually, um,
Mm.
emotionally, descriptive thing that I think I've probably ever heard. So that was really touching, and so
Mm.
those 3 live interviews were really amazing, really great starts, but they are live interviews, so the recordings aren't that great.
Mm.
But, yeah, I think you could just really start anywhere, and then if you decide that you like the format of my show, then start at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, you'll have, things to listen to for a very long time.
Yeah.
And just watching how, how affecting these stories can be. Um, I hear you on that. Um, I think something that a lot of people don't realize is the trauma actually for not only the person who's maybe the victim or the patient then who recovers, or the people in maybe who were there with them. People think, "Oh, oh, well, you had your accident 2 years ago," or, "Oh, you might have just, you did your tib and fib, and, oh, you've had your moon boot, and now you're back, and isn't that great?" And I think people don't recognize the ongoing healing and trauma that happens post-accident,
Mhm.
and that it's not just to that person, it's their whole circle. And when you think about, for those of us who love the outdoors and who find our mental, physical, spiritual and emotional and community health within those spaces, to face trauma within that place, which is a comfort place and a home place, can have a really long lasting effect on
Yeah.
people, and it's not something that you can heal quickly. Do you have any sort of comments or thoughts about that?
I think that you nailed it on the head, and I think compassion can go a long way. And not only 100% agree with what you just said, but I also think that another part of it is, when there is a physical injury, when there's a physical injury that happens when you are recreating outdoors, like for me when I blew my knee out, it it changed me. It
Mm.
stripped me of my of how I identify as an
Mm.
outdoor woman and as a climber and as mountain person, mountain woman. It takes your identity away, and the recovery time and what that does to your mental health. It really does change a person. So I think compassion can go a long way, and I also think giving yourself grace is really important. And then also, if you weren't the one that was involved in the incident and came out of it with a physical injury. So say you and I are climbing together, and say you're climbing and I'm belaying you, and then all of a sudden, you fall and I'm not paying attention for whatever reason, or something happens and the rope slips through my ATC, and all of a sudden you hit the ground and you get injured. You get physically injured. Maybe you break your arm, or maybe you injure your ankle, and then your climbing career is on a hard pause. But all that attention goes to you because you have this physical injury that you need to get healed up, right? And not a lot of people look at me and say, "Wow, Ashley, like, how are you doing? Yeah, you made this mistake yeah, I could tell you feel awful, and you may never climb again, because you may never belay anybody again because you have this PTSD that you can't forgive yourself for." And I think there's something to be said for that too. Is obviously pay attention and give attention and give first aid to those that have been physically injured, but also give attention and first aid to those that are mentally injured. So it's a double-edged sword, and they're both equally important, and I can't stress that enough.
Mm. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I think the very nature of all that stuff is why podcasting is an excellent way to share story, to
Mhm,
share a pathway to healing, because
mhm,
there's not that instant, um, you don't get the angry keyboard warriors jumping in like they can in social media
The
to give their
trolling.
opinion, you know,
The
which
trolling is awful.
which can be horrific to people who are already going through this stuff. The last thing they need is a pile on. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's certainly, yeah, it's a nice way, and it also it's that sense of bringing people around the campfire. Let's share a
Mhm.
story. Let's share in this non-judgmental, non-shame based, you know, framework, and think, well, how can this make me a better climber, bushwalker, hiker, backcountry
Mhm.
skier, whatever it is.
If there were any comments, any nasty or rude or unhelpful comments on any of my posts at all, I delete them.
Yeah.
There is no room for any of that on any of my social media. If you go on there and say, "Wow, what an idiot. I'd never do that." Your post is deleted. Like, I will not tolerate anything that makes people feel worse than they already do. I won't do
Mm.
it. That's not okay.
It's not okay. And do you have any, have you had any sort of feedback or response from people who have come onto the sharp end and have told their story and have then come back to you and said, "Hey, thanks. That actually helped with my processing and
So
dealing with
many.
it." Yeah.
So many. I would say 50% of the guests that have been on the show have said that the space that they were given to work through and share, you know, verbally process and work through and share their incident with others has helped them tremendously, which is so worth it. And I've wanted to quit doing my own show probably a dozen times because for me, like I mentioned to you before, I am an empath and I carry these stories and I feel their words and their experience in my gut and in my heart, and it is like really can weigh on me. And
Yeah.
so I've thought about leaving and walking away so many times, but I see the value, and I don't mean a monetary value, but I see the importance and the value of continuing to produce the show because the importance, that the appreciation, the importance that my guests tell me that they're getting from it, and not only the guests experience, but it's also the listeners too. Like I get lots and lots and lots of fan mail saying, "Ashley, I think you saved my life
Wow.
by me listening to this episode," and it's like, oh, the thought of me saving somebody's life, oh my gosh, like what a beautiful thing to give somebody is living longer potentially, and I don't know, but the thought of that being a possibility is just, God, it's worth the crying and it's worth the pain that I endure by producing the show.
Yeah. And the hours of research, recording, admin, editing,
Marketing,
posting, commenting, the whole thing.
emailing, mailing.
Planning awesome merch, can I just
Oh,
say?
thanks. Yeah.
By the way, yes, thank you, everyone. Ashley gave this to me very generously when we met up in the States. So, yeah, that's maybe one way that you could even support the work of Ashley and the show, The Sharp End, is by visiting her store. So in the show notes, I'm going to pop links to all of her stuff. I encourage you to absolutely check out her things. Subscribe, share it with your friends, and I guess finally, is there anything else you wanted to say, Ashley, about the Sharp End, or about your perspective, that you have after so many years of doing this, that you'd love the listeners of the Rescued podcast to know?
I'd just like to say, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so grateful and honored, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't believe it. And then, yeah, I just started a YouTube channel. So just like, this is you're doing video right now. I'm transitioning as into doing video as well. So, a lot of the, podcasts or a lot of the episodes that I've done in the last 6 episodes that I've done are now on YouTube, and moving forward, every episode that I will be doing will also be on YouTube. And I want to just leave the listeners with one final thing, which is, be kind, be compassionate, and, play hard and be smart.
Play hard, be smart. Excellent words. Ashley, thank you so much. All the best for the holiday season for you and your family and all of your community of listeners. And I look forward to listening to more here and right back at you. And
Yeah.
I look forward to listening to so much more of the Sharp End over my holidays and into next year as well.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate the time.